This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle Academy, where filmmakers and screenwriters go to learn from top Hollywood industry professionals. Learn more at ifhacademy.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Cody Meirick, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So we're going to talk about your documentary, Scary Stories, today. But first and foremost, man, how did you get started in the film business?
Sure. So I started. So I was always the creative type, and for a long time I wanted to be a writer. I guess I've thought back and realized back in my 20s I spent wanting to be a writer, a novelist, right? And it's because I always had this creative side. And then around the time I turned 30, right before, I moved to Chicago. Got a job with an education nonprofit where I work to this day, running a website. And nowadays, a lot of times running a website often involves creating content. And in this case, creating media, creating videos, web content, instructional videos, that sort of thing, right? And so I kind of learned a lot over the course of time working there, becoming a halfway decent editor, telling a story in 3-minute chunks in some respects. And so I got a certain amount of experience there. And at a certain point about 5 years ago, I decided, you know what? I have a lot of the tools and the know-how and that sort of thing to do a film, a low-budget film, and it's going back to this kind of creative side. And so I needed and a documentary really made sense. Essentially what I do is make 3-minute documentaries in web form, putting on a website. And so a full-length documentary made a lot of sense. I wanted it to be marketable. I wanted it to make sense. And I also wanted it to make sense for me to do it, having from an education nonprofit, talking about, and also with degrees in literature and that sort of thing, children's literature made a lot of sense. It also, first and foremost, I always would recommend, if you're going to spend the years to get off the ground your project, then have it be something you're interested in, have it be something you're passionate about, that sort of thing. And so this idea to do a documentary on this particular title made a whole lot of sense for me. And so, at some point you commit and you say,
I'm doing this.
It's exactly. Like you've done all these plans and so on and so forth. And but at some point you just like put it out there. Guess what? My name is Cody Meirick, and I'm making this documentary, and it has fits and starts over years, and documentaries definitely can, because you can kind of piece together interviews and other things over time, and so that's what I did. So it was I've been saying 5 years. Most of it happened over the course of 3-ish years, but then you can add on, you taking it to some festivals, finally getting distribution, so on and so forth. So the whole process from get-go to beginning was basically 5 years.
Nice. 5 years. So that's a long time to be on a project. So I'm assuming you're not doing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm assuming you have your this is a side hustle at this point.
No. I mean, the job I said I got about 10 years ago here in Chicago, still there. Okay. It's developed. The website has really grown, and I've helped it to grow, and we've taken it in different directions. But I'm still doing that to this day. Yeah.
Very cool. Now you made a documentary based on the very, very popular Scary Stories franchise, which is almost as like a Goosebumps. I think they're only behind Goosebumps as far as sales are concerned, correct?
Yes, and the interesting thing, I did interview L Stein, the author of Goosebumps, and he's kind of my celebrity. I definitely have some other fairly well-known people, but R.L. Stein's the one where it's like he's the Stephen King of the children's, children's literature. Everyone's pretty much heard of him, so he's a celebrity, right? And so, but these are a little bit different than his, because R.L. Stein's been interviewed about 1 million times. and it's a different interview when you're interviewing someone who's been interviewed 1 million times. These books, the author passed away a long time ago, and the illustrator is at this point famously known for not doing interviews. And so there was kind of a hole there that like, okay, a documentary that kind of gets under the hood and learns a bit about these books and how they came to be and how it's kind of a fandom, and that's what's great for a documentary is that, there's people that are very passionate about this title, whatever it may be. And then also you have the censorship piece. It's the arguably the most banned or challenged children's book of the last 40 years.
Wow.
I say children's book. The first decade that the American Library Association made a list, a decade-long list, was in the 1990s. It was number one on the list. The most challenged book of the 1990s was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And it was still in the top 10. The last one wasn't published since 1991. And so, in between 2000 and 2009, it was still in the top 10. So it was still a very much challenged book, even though they were always in print, but, they weren't, they had become more of having a cult following and that sort of thing. And so this is very different than, for instance, a Goosebumps documentary, because there's a number of other components to kind of go down and channel your documentary into.
Now, when you decided to go down this long and windy road of making this documentary, you had obviously in your mind, you chose a subject matter that is something that you can leverage. So you're leveraging the Scary Stories brand. You're also leveraging the audience for Scary Stories, which is over 7 million books, if I'm not mistaken, have been sold. And on top of that, how many more have been read? So you're talking about millions. This is a very large niche audience, but an audience that you could arguably target if you wanted to go after them through Facebook, through other ways of cultivating that audience. What were some of the ways that you did cultivate an audience or plan to target this audience with your film?
Sure. It takes time, but I also run the social media for the nonprofit I work for, so I've got a lot of experience with growing an audience on social media and that sort of thing, and targeting a audience, right? You got to stay active. You just got to, and each one is different. I remember I have a friend who is doing a podcast, totally not filmmaking podcast, just a podcast. Anyways, and he, I talked to him a bit about it, and you're still, no matter what, you're attaching yourself to a niche audience, and so you want to have a avenue and all the different platforms you're on to be constantly pumping out fresh stuff that people can like, people can share, so on and so forth. People are going to notice you because you're pumping out new information. How do you do that? Well, each one is different, but I can guarantee you any documentary that has a topic, I can tell you what the niche is, right? What's the one you usually use? Vegan chefs.
Yes, vegan chef.
Yes, vegan chefs. Well, there you go. I mean, you wouldn't want a documentary topic that's just food. It's way too broad. You're competing with websites and social media that it's
shows and networks.
Yeah, networks, exactly. Now start to niche down. Okay, vegan chef. Okay, you know what? You can wrap your head around that. There's people sharing things around being a vegan. There are people who've written books about being vegan, and I bet they would like to be promoted. So you promote them, and then when your film comes out, they're gonna, oh yeah, this is the person who shared my thing, so on and so forth. And
so did you do that with this? Did you do that with this movie?
If someone's been following me on social media for a while, they know I'm just incredibly active. With this particular one, the art, the illustrations from the book have become incredibly well known and beloved by many people. People get tattoos of the art. People do adaptations of the art, but then in a different style, or they make claymation things, or I don't know. There's a million things where people are kind of paying homage to the art. I guarantee you, in the past 5 years, if you made something I probably shared, made something related to scary stories to tell in dark, I probably shared it. Also, it's all based in folklore and urban legends, so there's a lot of kind of fun, interesting avenues you can go down, just to pick one story, pick one single story from it, and I probably shared some kind of tidbit about that story at some point, so on and so forth, on different social. I mean, it's just being really active, constantly pumping out stuff related to your topic, and people will like it, they'll share it, they'll comment on it, so on and so forth. It's a hustle, but just leading up to my first crowdfunding campaign, I spent 9 months building it, and I've been building it ever since. But I told myself I need 9 months to even build a little bit of an audience for that first one, which I did.
And how did that crowdfunding campaign go?
It went okay. I mean, I definitely have a love-hate relationship with crowdfunding at this point, which is to say, I know it's perfectly valid way to go, and I won't say I won't do it again for sure. I definitely can't say that because maybe I just need to. That said, so the first time I raised over 7,000, and then the two subsequent times I raised around 2,000 each. So I raised somewhere in the 12,000 range over the span of 3 campaigns. It happened, at different points of the production. So the first time I just had mostly a video pitch. I didn't have a trailer. The second time I had a trailer. Third time, so on and so forth. I mean, you try to, give them something new each time you're doing it. That said, each subsequent time, number one, the first one was the most successful because no one had ever thought about doing a documentary about scary stories to tell in the dark. It was the coolest idea ever, and people loved it. I didn't have a very good pitch. The pitch video was actually, I look back and I don't like it, but I didn't have enough for a trailer or a proper trailer, and so on and so forth. But just the very idea got me some press. I got mentioned on some very major websites just with the very concept of doing a documentary about these books. And so then subsequent ones, it dropped off, because I was hitting a certain amount of the same audience I was before through social media. I'd been building it, but still it's hard. And then also it's not a new idea anymore. So, people are still discovering it, so you can get some traction there, but it's definitely hard to get new press if I've heard of that. I don't know if it'll ever get done. So it's hard to see. That was my experience. That's not to say everyone has that same experience, but that was mine. And so it's tough. That said, could I have done this without crowdfunding? No, probably not. I mean, this is the end budget. I estimate being around $35,000, and that was paid for in various ways. And that 12,000 was a big chunk.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Now, a lot of people think that you need permission or you need the rights to do a documentary on a known subject. I know the answer to be no, for the most part, depending on what you do with it. So can you talk? I'm sure this has come up. Were you contacted by the CBS film people who are the producers of the new Guillermo del Toro produced narrative feature film version of this?
So early on, here's my advice, right? That if you can do, you absolutely want to do, and that is getting access. Now, getting access in a lot of ways is part of what's going to sell the documentary in the long run, but then also getting that access allows you to get out of various legal ramifications if you're getting that access. By access, I mean, for instance, in my case, the family of the author of the books reached out to me after that crowdfunding campaign. They loved the idea of the censorshiping. I mean, I'm sure they liked the idea of celebrating these books in a documentary form and that sort of thing, but also, the fact that I was really putting the censorship component up front and a big part of what the documentary was going to be about. They liked that. They loved it, and so they supported it. So that right there was a big thing right there.
Stamp of approval. It was like a stamp of
Yeah.
approval.
Yes, and they were a little bit of a liaison to some degree with the CBS film folks. Yes, they heard about it along the way. Of course, this all happened over years, but they heard about it. Main thing, and they didn't have to tell me this, but I was told indirectly, was just make sure you're not adapting any of the stories. Well, of course not. I know that. I know I can't do that, and it's a documentary. So, now the illustrations, that's a different thing altogether.
Right.
Yes. So again, the illustrator has been known for many years. It does not engage, whether it's interviews or anything else. Now, and I can see all over the internet that people are, not only replicating his art, and they're putting on shirts and selling them. They're making money on his illustrations. And after tons of research and numerous years, I knew he doesn't seem to be lawyering up and that sort of thing. So there was that. That said, the tricky part definitely with a documentary is, okay, let's hope no one even tries to get a lawyer, right? And definitely, because so you want to keep everyone happy. You want, and if you're doing a relatively positive spin on it, then you're relatively safe, which is to say, you're safer than not. It's not like I'm attacking these books or attacking an IP, that for some reason then you're going to get into all kinds of possible ramifications and legal and all that stuff. That said, I mean, there's definitely a nuts and bolts part of it as far as, okay, I don't have permission to use these illustrations, but I use them throughout the documentary, but people are talking about it's illustrating a point that someone is saying, so on and so forth. I mean, there's a nuts and bolts way of editing it, so you're pretty safe. That said, you're still going to end up giving it to a lawyer at the end and saying, here, watch the whole thing. How much risk am I taking on, right? I do, and you, yeah. I mean, one thing I would recommend is, if you can, especially with a documentary, it's a bit easier. Get a fiscal sponsor, and that really helped, because I don't know how much I could afford the legal fees that I needed sporadically, and I was able to get them for free because I got a fiscal sponsor and went through channels to get that. And so that was very helpful. You're always taking on a certain amount of risk. I mean, I don't know. Every film is risk, right? I mean, you do the consent process as best you can. Documentary, you're definitely lessening your risk all along the way by doing proper consents and so on and so forth, and jumping through hurdles and getting certain things signed from certain people and stuff like that. That said, I was told by another documentary filmmaker some time ago, I mean, legally speaking, you can get away with a certain amount of seconds, and it's probably not going to get any traction, anyone trying to say you can't show that. I mean, if it's brief enough, and again, you can wrap it in, like the fact that people are talking about it and you're showing something, that's illustrating their point and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's something called fair use, and there is a certain amount of that. But there's a film that I always bring up is Room 237, that documentary about Stanley Kubrick.
Yes.
Like, you watch that movie and they're just showing full scenes from The Shining. Complete, and they're actually not even showing full scenes of The Shining. They're showing full scenes of Eyes Wide Shut, and they're using it to demonstrate something else. But and that movie didn't get sued, and I know it wasn't in a positive light. I mean, it made Stanley into this kind of recluse, crazy conspiracy theorist kind of thing. So it wasn't a positive spin on the film, on Stanley, on anything. So, and you could see the very first thing that said, this is not sponsored or approved by anybody at Warner Brothers, anybody at this or that. But it got made and got released in a large way. But the one thing that they do in that movie is they never show a clip of a movie without someone talking underneath it. It's never like they just show a scene from The Shining. Like, they didn't do that. They basically always had someone talking under it. So it's all about how much you want to kind of go after it. You know, how much.
I mean, and that's what you learn about fair use. There isn't, if you're looking for some kind of rule, hard and fast rule, you're not going to find it. It doesn't exist. The hard and fast rule is get a lawyer and talk to them along the way, or definitely, you know, when it's finished and you have a cut of it. That's the hard and fast rule, is honestly, and I guarantee you they talked to a lawyer and they laid out risks, and they were probably, I'm sure there still were risks. I mean,
it's massive. Massive risks.
There's still plenty of risk there. I mean, to some degree, you're going down the road of what you can do from the very beginning is choose a topic where, you know, you don't think anyone is going to have a problem with it, right? I mean,
it all depends. Like, I mean, if you go, you know, like I did, I went to the Sundance Film Festival and shot a whole film at the Sundance Film Festival without their permission, shooting while the festival is going on. And you know, a lot of people are like, are you afraid of Sundance? I'm like, no, I really hope they lawyer up, because can you imagine the press on Sundance trying to crack down on an independent filmmaker to make a film about, basically it was a love letter to Sundance and Park City. On top of it, wasn't even negative, though I do poke a little fun. It's a parody almost of what it's like to be a filmmaker, though I think it's more of a documentary because it's so ridiculous. Yeah. But people were like, you know, but that's not even a documentary, but it is parody. And parody is another world that you can get away with. So it's all, it's a real gray area, and it's all about the filmmaker and how confident they are that, you know, honestly, how ballsy they are. Because there's a lot of documentaries about subjects that the subject matter in the documentary doesn't want the documentary to come out. That's some of the best documentaries ever are about that, you know, or they, you know, so it's very interesting. So I was curious about that, and I wanted to get that out there because a lot of people don't, because this is a fairly known brand. It's a fairly known property. And, you know, it's kind of like if I want to make the Harry Potter documentary, which I'm sure there is.
What I've talked about a little bit is this idea of early on having a plan for taking your documentary out of the realm of being a fan film. Okay. Mm-hmm. Harry Potter's a good example. I can turn around and make a Harry Potter movie tomorrow, but how is that different? How did I add value? How did I make it any different than anyone posting anything on YouTube and just throwing up there of random people talking about Harry Potter? Okay. And I really, you know, there's a glut of movies in general, but there's a glut of documentaries. Nowadays, everyone and their brother has a documentary about every topic out there, right? Virtually everyone, and that's kind of the running joke is now they're doing a documentary about this, you know, or that, and so on and so forth. So you need to find ways to rise above that and say, okay, this is more than a fan film. This is more, I'm adding value. You know, I mean, celebrities, that's the go-to. If you can get some celebrities, great. Interview them. That's value, because people like to hear celebrities talk about, you know, whatever it is. B, access. Like I was saying earlier, you know, if you have access to the story, a documentary that was making the festivals around the same time I was going around is a documentary about Monster Squad.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a great
cult favorite, right, of the 80s. And, you know, but there's a lot of cult favorites. What set that apart? It was one of the kids in the movie doing the documentary. So he immediately had access to the quote unquote official story of that movie. So that you know, I'm not going to turn around and make a movie about Texas Chainsaw Massacre tomorrow because I have no access. And how do I make that any different?
Yeah, wasn't it like that other movie, the worst movie ever made? Or it was about Troll 2.
Yes, exactly.
which
And
was
it was one of the people that were in it,
which is so
and
amazing. That, by the way,
that,
anyone who has not
that
seen
was
that documentary, it's so much better than the movie. I can't even tell you.
yes. It
I
was very
actually felt when I saw Troll 2, after, because I saw the documentary, then I'm like, well, I gotta go watch Troll 2, and then I watched Troll 2. I felt a little bit of myself die inside. It was that bad of a
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Like, I love The Room. I can watch The Room all day, and
yes.
especially with a group of other filmmakers, it's even better. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the distribution plan for the film, and what kind of window strategy did you have with it?
So I had, I definitely, I did what you probably preach not doing, which is to some degree, you know, hope for the best sort of thing. Go take it every step of the way. Take it to a few festivals. I didn't go to a ton of festivals because I do think, unless you're getting in the top 5 or 6, then you can definitely spend way too much money touring around trying to go to festivals. But I did a few, and and then that resulted in several distributors being interested right around the same time, 3 in all, and they're all smaller distributors. I mean, there's a lot of them, right? And so that was very interesting and also very helpful because not that I'm going to go into detail here, but I did get to see kind of the quote unquote deal for several different of these smaller distributors, and that was an experience in and of itself. Just so I can kind of see, as much as you read here and there about it, it's still hard because even what you read sometimes are, examples of, oh, I made a small movie, it was $1 million. Well, that's a different level, right? I want to read about the people who made their film for in the
30, 40, 50, 100 grand at
yeah,
the most.
exactly. Yeah, and so you didn't make it for 5,000, so you do need to make money, and you have a little bit of debt, or you maybe are paying people on the back end a little bit here and there, and so on. So you need to make a certain amount of money. That said, you don't need to make $1 million or $500,000 or anything like that. So anyways, so that was a useful experience for sure, kind of seeing the different distributors interested and seeing a few deals, and I went with one of them for various reasons. And yeah, as far as, I kind of knew, I mean, inevitably a distributor contacts you. Okay, let's look at their library. Let's do some research. Let's figure out, okay, here are the other titles. Is how different and similar are mine compared to others. This was a distributor that was known for horror movies, lower budget horror movies. That not a big surprise. It's a documentary. I was mostly asking, okay, they have done some documentaries previously, but their bread and butter is more on the lower budget horror movies. And so, okay, with documentaries, a big thing is education distributors and that sort of thing. So I asked him a lot of questions regarding that. And but as far as the release and windowing, I wasn't surprised what we did, which is, TVOD over the summer and for about 4 months, and then and DVD as well in the middle of that, and then Amazon Prime, which it's on Amazon Prime now.
But you windowed it out with the release of the narrative film by CBS Films.
Yes. I mean,
to leverage that a bit.
Yeah, sure. Yep. I mean,
why wouldn't you? I mean,
yeah, why wouldn't we? And how much that does, I don't know. It's really hard to parse things because I also hustled the heck out of it the entire time in all kinds of other ways, and I've been building all kinds of things, so on and so forth. And and they hired a PR company. How much they're admittedly, how a smaller distributor works. They're gonna put some. If you're lucky, they put some money into pushing it for a period of time, and they definitely did. Okay. So it's a little bit of a, okay, how whatever success comes, it can be difficult to parse, how much was it me hustling, how much is it was the distributor actually putting some effort, and how much of it was just, okay, it was good timing, and so it was going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm not sure what kind of response you would have had 5 years ago if this film would have come out.
Sure, absolutely. From the get-go, as far as the adaptation goes, so I had the idea for this documentary 5 years ago, and I started to make a few spreadsheets, a couple lists, and that sort of thing, and then boom, announced CBS Films purchased the adaptation rights.
Which means nothing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So 5 years ago, they put a couple writers that are long since gone. It's been in development for many years, and then it could have never happened. Which my thing even back then was like, if it never happens, then my documentary is all anyone has
about this.
And so even if it never happens, then there's a benefit there, because it was obvious that people were excited. I could see, it was making news, and people on social media and so on and so forth were talking about, wouldn't it be great to have a Scary Stories to Tell in Dark movie? So those same people, in theory, will get something out of a documentary that does something very different. And then you've got the censorship piece, which really sets it apart from any kind of adaptation.
Right, but I think also moving forward in the future, anybody who searches for scary stories, you're the second result from here until eternity, or as long as those films are up on those platforms. So that's not a bad place to do. It's like if you do a Back to the Future or a Big Trouble in Little China, as a call out to the two posters behind you, documentaries, anytime someone searches for those movies, that documentary pops up right next to it. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing, and easy marketing. It is. Anytime you could attach yourself to a popular brand and or franchise in one way, shape, or form, documentary being the easiest way to do it without getting sued, is a really good way of going about it. Now, you also talked a little bit.
I was just going to say, one thing I'd also recommend, if you can, and not all documentaries do this, but if you can, attach some kind of cause behind it. I have, these are the most banned books of the last 40 years, that sort of thing. Anytime, like if it's a movie, okay, was it a black filmmaker? Was it a woman filmmaker? Was it back when there weren't many of those, or was it this? I don't know. This each one
could be
different,
1,000 things. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be 1,000 things, but if you can add some kind of emotion to it in some way, some kind of cause in some way, shape, or form, I think that packages it so much better and says, okay, there's a reason for this documentary to exist. Because I think from the get-go, you have to make that argument. You have to say, why make this documentary? And so you have to punch people in the face with the fact that there's a very important reason for this documentary to exist. And so attaching that cause is
it's very helpful, and it also expands your audience. So people listening, you have a niche audience of people who like scary stories, but then all of a sudden you've got a whole brand new spill-off audience, which is just people who are interested in the concept of banning books or the subject of banned books and censorship and all that. That's a whole other group that you can target, which is arguably fairly niche and arguably something that you could focus on. Whether they're going to want to watch a movie about scary stories, who knows? But there is a potential audience there that just by tweaking the documentary a bit, it opens yourself up to it. So why wouldn't you? It makes the documentary more interesting.
Yes, and there's Banned Books Month, there's Banned Books Week, which is September, which leads into October and Halloween time. So it's like September and October is like my hopefully people will watch it any time of the year, but I feel like that time of year people are talking about banned books, and then they're talking about scary movies and books and that sort of thing. So it's any cause you have, you're totally right. You're kind of adding an audience, and you can focus focus your efforts towards, okay, do they have a day or a week or something, an event that is all about that? Then that's
Convention,
something you
yeah.
can, convention, whatever it is. And American Library Association is here in Chicago, and I've made friends with them and interviewed people with them and that sort of thing. So there's various institutions around that cause that you can really leverage. And you're totally right. You're hitting a slightly different audience than you were before.
Now, I always propose, being a filmtrepreneur, you always think about other product lines, other ancillary products that you can sell, other things you can do, or services you can do. You're fairly limited in this scenario because you don't have the rights. So you can't make a T-shirt, you can't make a hat, you can't make a mug or anything that has the term Scary Stories on, because you don't own that brand. But, and I'm not sure if you have done this, but this is my unsolicited advice to you, since you have built up this audience that likes scary stories, why wouldn't you create an affiliate program with Amazon and sell scary story books, scary story merchandise, scary story, all that stuff, and you could easily put that up on your social media platforms, on your website, put a store together, so anyone who happens to find you or finds out more about Scary Stories, a documentary, if they go there, chances are that they might want to buy the book or buy a T-shirt, and that's something that you could just be an affiliate for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's opening those doors, but I think that's an hey, you got no argument here. I don't know. I'll have to look into it. Yeah, for sure.
It's fairly easy to open up an Amazon affiliate account, and it's just an easy passive revenue stream that is 100% yours. You don't have to sell it. You don't have to, there's no deal with the distributor about it, nothing else. And when you have a brand as popular as this, you can create an online store being an affiliate that sells not only scary story stuff, but then you start thinking like, well, if I'm L Stein books, Goosebumps stuff, you can start creating all these product lines and little categories of things that audience might buy. And if they click on, I don't know if you know how affiliate programs work, but I'll tell the audience is if they click on your link for the Scary Stories book and like, I really don't want that Scary Stories book right now, but I do need that inflatable mattress. Boom, they click and they buy the inflatable mattress within 24 hours if you click in that link, and you get, I think it's 5% or whatever the percentage is of that sale, depending on the product. And they could spend $1,000, and I make a ton every month. Specifically, like they just click in, they're like, oh, I really want to buy that book, but while I'm here, I'll buy my groceries, I'll buy that shirt that I wanted, I'll buy that camera package I've been looking for, or that lens, and you get a piece of that action. So it's a really great way to make a passive revenue stream off this documentary moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I will absolutely look into that. That's good advice.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests, sir. What advice would you give a filmtrepreneur starting a project today?
I'll go back to the message of my documentary, which is read. Read a lot. I never went to film school, but I've read a whole lot of books about how to put together a movie, how to, modern distribution, so on and so forth. So I would say a lot of research and a lot of reading. I mean, just make it a priority to, I went through a period, I'm not doing it now, but I went through a period where I was watching at least one filmmaking documentary a month and reading at least one book, a filmmaking book a month for a long period of time. And I mean, I know a lot more and I'm a lot better at what I do because I made it a point to say I'm going to consume as much information as now you get to ingest it and then decide on your own, okay, how much of that am I going to take and how much, doesn't apply to me, so on and so forth. But just reading a ton makes a difference.
Absolutely. Educate yourself as much as humanly possible. Put those tools in that toolbox.
Yep.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
I would say that that it is a hustle and it's an ongoing hustle. And so I've gotten in a certain mentality sometimes, and I think we're all guilty of it, of planning like crazy and getting everything prepared. It's like, building a plane because you're about to go off a cliff and you think, okay, I'm going to go off that cliff. It's just going to fly and sail and the job is done and voila. I feel a little bit like I did that in my first crowdfunding campaign, where it's like I put so much into that, and I read so many people say it's just, it's like a second job for an entire 6 weeks or month or whatever you do it. You are going to hustle,
Every
incredibly
day.
hard for that period. But if you do, you will hit your goal. Well, I didn't hit my goal, but I accomplished a certain amount and that sort of thing. But anyways, you put all this information or all this planning into something, and you think it's just going to coast along after that. And that's not how life works, and that's not how filmmaking works. It's a constant hustle. The film's never done.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing, I think, so it took. I definitely took some time to learn that, but also on top of that, the positive thing, the nice thing about being an independent filmmaker is that, at least for me, if you're in the producing, directing, writing type situation, your movie can define you more than all the other things that you might put energy towards. Like, you will always be attached to that piece of art, whatever it is. And so, I mean, I really like that. I like, at one point I wanted to be a novelist, but it was a similar thing where it's like you put it out there in the world, and that's part of what defines you. And if you, hopefully you really liked it, then it's always out there, but like I said, it's never done. And you're always looking towards the next project, and you're also always looking at the last project to see, okay,
Got it.
How is it doing,
And now, 3 of your favorite films of all time.
One of them I'll probably have to choose a Charlie Kaufman movie.
Mm-hmm.
Eternal Sunshine.
Oh, cool. I love adaptation. Adaptation is one of my favorites.
That's my number 2. If you caught me a different day, I might say adaptation, but today I'll say Eternal Sunshine. I'll probably go with, it's a little cliche, but I'll say Shawshank Redemption.
Well, if you've listened to the show, you know that's obviously the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, but it's almost cliche because
if you don't love that movie, you're dead inside, and I can't speak to you. I mean, It's obviously.
Yes. And then the third, I will go with What Dreams May Come.
I love that film.
Yes,
I
it's
love that film.
depressing as all heck, but
nowadays even more so.
Yes.
That's a movie, and for people who haven't seen that one, that's the one with Robin Williams about suicide and death, and it's rough. In hindsight, it's a rough movie to watch now, but it is beautiful, stunning. It won the Oscar for best visual effects. It was basically like a Renaissance painting. The whole thing was like a Renaissance painting. It was just gorgeous, beautifully done. Good choices, sir. Good choices. Now, where can people find you and find the documentary and find more about everything?
So you can definitely find me website and social media is mostly Scary Stories Doc. Mm-hmm. And so you can definitely find me there. Giant Thumb Studios. You can find the website, that separate website. And as far as the documentary, it's on Amazon Prime right now, and it's on all the major VOD. It's on DVD. So you can definitely Google Scary Stories to Tell in Dark documentary. It's all over. You'll find reviews. You'll find all kinds of stuff. So it'll be the first thing you find. Little competition when there's no other one. So that's a good thing too. Yes. You are in as what I like to call the blue ocean, where there is not a lot of blood in the water. So very good, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show, brother. I really appreciate it.